I don't care about your revenue. I only care about the profitability when I come in, because if I can get you highly profitable, right, your revenue is going to grow regardless. But if your revenue is growing and you're not doing the things that you need to do to have high profitability, you're just increasing your workload for probably less money. And I don't think that's smart business.
Welcome to Personal Finance Cat, where I share my personal take on personal finance. Hi, Byron. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So I think your t-shirt has the name of your company, CFOAF.
Yeah.
Okay.
CFOAF.
Stands for what I think it stands for?
It does. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep. 100%. Yeah.
Maybe
So if you ask my
Uh-huh.
co-founder, my wife, she'll say accounting and finance. Because she's the
She's an
no,
accounting
that
and
was
finance person in the business. Oh.
yeah. So yeah, I'm a CPA. We do fractional CFO. We do tax strategy. All those things. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely an accounting and finance, and taxes firm. So the accounting and finance does fit. But yeah, that was not the original intention.
Yeah. Okay, figured. Let's start with that then. Why did you start this company? What inspired you and what is it like now? Yeah.
Yeah, so I knew from a very young age I was a really horrible employee, and so I needed to be in business for myself. And so I had started some businesses, ran them, did well. I sold some failed. Throughout the years, I've always been, on that trajectory of being a small business owner, multiple small businesses. The CPA came from just wanting to know more about it. What I found was banks wanted me to have a high profit so that they would loan me money to continue to have expansion, so that I could buy inventory on credit or, whatever I needed. You needed to have high profits for the banks to support you. But if you show high profits, the IRS comes in and takes half of your money. And I didn't like that. So tax strategy was a focus of like, how do I show high profit, but not pay a ton of money in taxes? My family owned a CPA firm, which was nice. My mom was a CPA. We have attorneys and stuff in the family, and so it gave me the opportunity to learn some of those things. So I went, did the college experience and did CPA or accounting work, headed towards my CPA. Took the test, insanely difficult test. Got the designation. And just had it ever since. So I did some CPA work for other people. I really preferred to do it in a business environment, and so that led me to this point of I know the position that I'm really good at. And when you're looking at a business, there's essentially the CEO at the top. Followed by like a CFO, Chief Financial Officer, the COO, Chief Operations Officer, Chief Marketing Officer, Chief Information Officer, Chief Sales Officer. So there's all these seats that need to be filled. And the one that I'm really, really good at is that CFO seat. So I wanted a business that focused on the things that I was really good at that I could utilize for some of the businesses that we own. And also be able to help a lot of other entrepreneurs to fill that gap in their own businesses. So we focus on tax strategy and we focus on fractional CFO. That's kind of the two pillars. And we do bookkeeping, we do tax prep and filing, all that stuff. It's a full CPA, full spectrum firm. But those are our two main pillars: is helping people in fractional CFO work or fractional Chief Financial Officer work, but then also the tax strategy that allows them to show high profit, but minimize that tax liability that they have.
Wow, very interesting. Can you talk about the two pillars a little bit more? I think the first one you mentioned, it's well, maybe let's talk about the tax strategy first, because I think that sounds more interesting.
Yeah.
I invest in real estate, so I know that there's a lot of maybe tax benefit to be had. The beneficial tax code that applies to real estate. But I mean, I don't know what other industries that you focus on. What are some of the kind of interesting ideas in terms of tax planning you can do? Maybe can you give us an example?
Yeah, of course. So tax strategy is essentially showing the high profit, but minimizing the taxes. So what a lot of lazy CPAs will do is they'll come into a business and they say, hey, let's make it look like you don't make any money, and then you don't have to pay taxes, right? Well, banks hate that. And you're not going to get any financing. And like, who loves to brag about the fact that they own a business that doesn't make any money? So that doesn't work for me. I think it's lazy and I don't like it. I like to show high profitability, or at least true profitability. Like if you're making it, you should be able to show it. But the tax strategy is the difference between that high profit and minimizing that tax liability. And so you mentioned real estate. So for real estate people, if you can get the real estate professional for tax purposes, very different. There's real estate agents. There's real estate professionals. There's people that are in real estate. Real estate professional for tax purposes is very different. It's a designation. You have to do at least 750 hours of real estate involved activity. It has to be on one calendar. Some other thing, if you have a regular job, it's 1 hour more. So you have to spend more time doing real estate than any other job that you have. So if you have a traditional W-2 job, let's say you work 2,000 hours, that 750 becomes 2,001 hours. So that's one of the things that trips people up. But being a real estate professional for tax purposes gives you a lot of advantages. Things that would be like passive losses can be moved into the active. A lot of your capital gains, and capital losses can be offset in other arenas. It gives you access to full use of a cost segregation study, which is the ability to take like a property that you purchase that maybe is on like a 27.5 year depreciation schedule, and you can break that down into some immediate write-offs, some 5, 7, 15s. So you're going to depreciate it faster. And so and I won't go crazy into cost segregation. Happy we could do a whole podcast about this, but what a lot of real estate investors will do is they'll use cost segregation studies to offset the whole down payment of what they make to get into that property. So they'll buy a $500,000 rental property, maybe it's a duplex or single family quadplex, in certain areas, and then the cost segregation study gives them the depreciation. Let's say they put $100,000 down on a $500,000 piece of property. That cost segregation study gives them the depreciation write-offs of say 150 or 180,000 on that property. And so they get to take that off of their taxes, which means they have no tax liability. So instead of paying that $100K maybe to the IRS, they get to use that to purchase a property. That takes their tax liability down to zero, sometimes carry over losses. So it goes against other income that you would be paying taxes on. But the banks, they see it as highly profitable because all that depreciation comes back into what you make. So if you made $1 million and you had $1 million in depreciation, bank still sees you as $1 million earner, but the $1 million in depreciation takes you down to a zero. So no taxes, right? And so it allows you to take advantage of that, your 1031 exchanges, which, that's been kind of beat to death. But there's a lot of things that you can do as a real estate investor that having that real estate professional designation makes available to you. If you're not a real estate investor, like tax strategy, there's Augusta rule, which again, if you've ever even been on TikTok or Instagram, anything, there's a million people that talk about the Augusta rule, which is a real thing, but you need to utilize it in a very specific way. So I think it's one of those, don't just, Google it, use somebody that actually knows what they're talking about to like set that up correctly. There's paying your kids. You can pay your kids up to the standard deduction for the year. So it's like $14,800 this year per kid. You can pay the kids, they get the write-off, so it becomes tax-free income because they're not paying taxes on it, standard deduction. And then that goes into an account that you can designate to pay for expenses that are associated with your child that you would normally be paying at a personal level, right, with no real impact, and you would be paying taxes on that $14,800 that you're paying to those kids. So you get to utilize that. You have the home office deduction, which this gets done improperly a lot. Most people just take the standard, and they say, hey, it's 300 times this, and okay, cool, I get $800 off my taxes. Well, if you do the complicated method or the regular method, not the simplified, you get to write off all of that and that portion of those expenses. So that write-off can be significantly higher. The other thing, this is the only time that you can utilize depreciation in a primary residence. So home office depreciation allows you to designate that home office as a rental, so it becomes commercial property. You know this as a real estate investor, and now you can depreciate that piece of it, whereas normally you can't depreciate your personal residence. So it allows you to take advantage of that. There's a lot of other things. You can put money into HSA, allows you to fully fund retirements. So you start knocking these things off, and not any single thing is going to have, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars of impact. But if you're constantly using a lot of these strategies and you're knocking out, $10,000 here, $20,000 here, maybe $5,000 here, you knock out those taxes till you get to the point where you've utilized that money in the way that you should for retirement, reinvestment, whatever, without having to give a big chunk of that back to the IRS. So that's tax strategy.
Yeah, that's great. There's so much there. Thank you for sharing all that. Do you recommend people, especially for smaller businesses or just solo entrepreneur, do you recommend them to kind of explore that on their own, or is this kind of dicey and they should use a professional such as yourself to figure that out?
Yeah, I would highly, highly suggest you use a professional. You know what one of our core values at CFOAF, and all of our employees can repeat this, is that we're looking for an ROI for every client. So when we have a client that comes in and they say, "Hey, I'd like to explore tax strategy," we'll set them up with those provisions, and it's about $10,000 annually for a tax strategy. That includes your filing, the strategy, everything. But we're looking for like a 2x or greater ROI. And so what that means is when I take on a tax strategy client, we do a full analysis, and we're trying to make sure that $10,000 that they're paying for those services, they're investing in those tax strategy services, that they're going to get at least $20,000 real dollars back to them. So again, kind of back to the lazy CPA, you pay for that twice. You pay them to prep and file your taxes, right? And then you pay the IRS whatever the tax liability is that they've spit out in their, very minimal amount of work. So you're paying them and you're paying the IRS. With tax strategy, you're investing that money to find the strategies to allow you to not have that massive tax liability, or to potentially have some carry forward losses, take advantage of tax credits and all these other things that exist, so that you're getting a real return on investment with your investment in that tax strategy. So to me, that's the way that taxes should be done. Like, it should be a strategy, not a reaction. We're very proactive. We require a quarterly meeting with our clients. We want to talk to them at least once a quarter on what they're doing and what that looks like for the future tax liability, the future profitability of the company. And then we have a year-end review. So it's a mandatory 5 meetings annually that we have, so that we're utilizing strategy correctly. Whereas most people that we talk to, they're on their phone, maybe a Zoom, maybe a phone call, whatever, once a year. You can't do tax strategy once a year. That's not a thing. You don't run your business by checking in on it once a year. You're in there 5 days a week. Some people 68 hours a week, right? Mm-hmm. So if you treat your strategy the same way that you would anything else, and you're proactive about it instead of reactive, then you get to take advantage of it. But you can't use it as an afterthought. As scary as taxes are, if you have the professional in place, that's their point, that's what they're doing for you, it's not scary at all. So long answer was that. Short answer, use a professional. I mean, it's just going to pay off every time.
Yeah. No, I would tend to agree with you, because tax code is very complicated, even though people talk about it as if it's simple, but you really have to get it right. Otherwise, you might get yourself into trouble. It sounds like maybe your other pillar, which is the fractional CFO, might go really well with this tax pillar. So can you talk about the fractional CFO? How does that work? What does that mean?
Yeah. So most companies in their growth stages, they go from handling the books, and then they just kind of muddle their way through to hopefully they get to a point where they can afford that multiple 6-figure CFO to come in and really give them direction. What we have found is that gap between doing it yourself and being able to afford the $300,000, $500,000, $600,000 CFO, like that gap is really where we want to step in and help out. So instead of paying that, like high level CFO before the company could really financially afford that. We step in on a fractional basis and give the CFO insights. So it may be a meeting, once a month. Maybe it's, a couple of times a month, whatever. But they're working in the background to give you the CFO insights so that you're not relying entirely on your experience. You have a professional that's figuring out your key performance indicators, your KPIs. They're giving you the metrics that needs to exist within your company. What levers can you pull to change the trajectory, right? If I need to make more revenue, what do I do to do that? If I need to increase profitability, what do I need to do that? If I need to utilize efficiency with my payroll staff, what do I need to do that? Right? Answers those questions. It builds out the forecast so that you know where you're going. What do I need to do to get there? And where am I going to be in 5 years? What a lot of people don't realize is when you sell a company, when you decide to sell a company that you own, you're 5 years from sale, realistically. Sometimes it's 3. Right? Sometimes it's 8, but realistically, it's about 5 years. So if you get to a point where you say, I'm ready to sell this business, I think I'm done, right? You've got 5 more years before you can do that if you haven't prepped in advance. But if you bring in a CFO, fractional CFO, getting to the point where having somebody full-time, you start building those processes, the systems, the processes, the metrics, the KPIs, the good financials, that whoever is going to buy this company, whether you're going public, going private equity, P&E, selling to a competitor, selling to a family member, whatever needs to be set up to make that transition, that starts with a CFO. So you start that transition, you set things up for success for your business, your focus. We focus on profitability. I'm really bad for saying I don't care about your revenue. I only care about your profitability, but it's true. I don't care about your revenue. I only care about the profitability when I come in, because if I can get you highly profitable, right, your revenue is going to grow regardless. But if your revenue is growing and you're not doing the things that you need to do to have high profitability, you're just increasing your workload for probably less money. And I don't think that's smart business. So I want to get your profit to the highest level that we possibly can, right? And then once we have your profit at the highest level that you can be at, if you're at a 10% profit and the industry says you should be at a 30, I want you at a 40, right? If you're a restaurant, and restaurants have notoriously low profitabilities, and I think the average is like 7. Well, if the average is 7, let's get you to 14. Let's double that. Let's get you highly profitable. And so as you scale, as you grow, the systems are already in place, the efficiencies are already in place, so that as you grow your revenue, your profit increases. I tell people all the time, my goal is to get your profitability at the highest it can be, and then set you on the game plan so that you make more money by working less within your business. We want to systemize this. We want to get the people in the right place. We want the metrics for you to watch so that you work in the business less, you work on the business more, so that you can start the process of stepping out. So 5 years from now, you're not the linchpin that holds the business together. The systems, the processes are the linchpin that hold it together. And now it's easy to sell because you can step out of it, and anybody can step into your business and run this thing and continue to have the profitability that you have experienced through that process. So that's where the fractional CFO is great, because it's not that high dollar, but you're getting the high value rewards of having a CFO, because most businesses don't need a 40-hour full-time CFO. That really comes at the, I would argue probably the 60, 50, 60 million mark is really where you have to have a full-time CFO. You should start exploring that in the 20 million range, right? But you 100% can afford a fractional CFO at a certain level, when you get into the multiple millions up to that 50 million mark. And the reality is it can be done on a fractional basis. You don't need somebody 40 hours full-time at that high salary to make that happen. I've interviewed tons of CFOs that are in that 10 to 30 million range, and they will freely admit that they don't do 40 hours of CFO work. There's generally 10 to 20 CFO, and there's probably 10 to 20 that would be controller level. That's about half the cost. So for a lot of companies, you need a really good accountant, really good bookkeeper, maybe a really good controller, and the fractional really will fill in the space that you need to ramp up and go past the 50 million mark.
Okay. Well, that's great. A lot of information there. So maybe a couple of follow-ups. It sounds like maybe the sweet spot of starting to use a fractional CFO is between 10 to 30 $1 million of revenue. But what about below that? Is there any like service that you would recommend for companies that are yet to reach that 10 million level?
Yeah, I would argue it's realistically the fractional CFO starts around the 3 million mark
Okay.
for most people. And so I would say it's really kind of 3 to say 20 is the really sweet spot. If you wait to 20 million, a lot of people that wait to get a fractional in, by the time you get to 20 million, it's a little bit of a mess. And you probably would need somebody full time to kind of get things under control. And so, I'm not saying that it's luck that got you to 20 mil, but you probably have some skills in the CFO arena to get there. It's really hard to get to 20 million without having those things dialed in and having good KPIs, metrics, all that. So to me, it really is that 3 to 20 is the sweet spot, and that's where most of our clients fall. We stay with them past 20. We have multiple clients that have gone well past the 20, but we have the systems and processes in place to make that happen. And if it's done correctly, you start the search at around that 30 million. You need it really filled by 50. But you start the search and making the transition. So at 3 mil, you don't need a CFO, multiple times a month. We have a $3,000 a month service that's a once a month, just kind of a very ingrained 75-minute meeting with a fractional CFO where you're going to go over all of those numbers. It's a weekly check-in, so we're looking at everything, we're checking the numbers, we're sending out, like, hey, this is where this is, this needs to be adjusted, what is this, what was this decision? So you have those weekly touch bases, but it's a very in-depth 75-minute, like fully focused, let's go over every aspect of your business and let's make changes that need to be made. Let's assess what you currently have with your metrics, what you currently have with your KPIs, and let's make the changes that need to be made so that we can get to where we need to be. So we build those forecasts. Forecasts are going to result in budgets. What I don't like is I love a top-down budget. I don't like a bottom-up budget. A bottom-up budget says, well, I only want to spend X number of dollars on this. Okay, well, why? Well, because I don't think we should spend more money than that. That's not a good reason. I want to say this is where you want to be, and to be a $10 million company, right, you're going to have to spend X number of dollars in marketing. So when I say a budget, what I'm saying is, like, one, your marketing needs to ROI better than your profitability. It's a very easy calculation. People get really mixed up on this. It's very simple. Take the profitability that you have now and you divide that into your marketing dollars. So if you're at a 10% profitability, every dollar that you spend in marketing should result in $10, right? Because you spend $1. If it makes $10, you're only earning $1. That's your break even. Anything less than that is losing you money. Quit spending money there. Anything above that is positive. So that's very simple. And then I want to set the goal. You want to be at 20% profit margin. Perfect. Let's look at that. Let's work that back in. So for every dollar, if we want to be at a 20% profit margin, that needs to produce $20. It's very simple. So that's how we figure out the marketing that needs to be spent. But we need to know that we're going to spend this number of dollars to get to where we need to be, to get to the forecast. Same thing with labor. Right? We need efficiencies in our labor. We're going to look at revenue per employee, and we're going to look at salary per employee. That's going to give us our RPE indicator that tells us what our profitability is based on the number of employees we have. What's our efficiency level, right? As our salary per employee goes up, our revenue should go up, our profit should go up. If it's not, we don't have efficiencies there. When we get to a certain level of RPE, and it may look great, say, hey, man, we got $600,000 revenue per employee. Well, that sounds fantastic. But your people are stressed because we know that's the cap. When you get to that point, you have way too few people doing way too much work. We've got to bring somebody in to increase that efficiency. So it tells us when to hire, tells us when to fire, says we're efficient, we're not efficient. And so these are the metrics. These are the budgets that we have to set but they're based on where we want to be, not just some ingrained idea of I don't want to spend more than this, because maybe, well, my dad started this business and he said I should never spend more than, $1 million in labor in any given year, okay. Well, your dad was doing $3 million, and so $1 million in payroll makes sense. You want to be at $30 million. So $1 million in payroll doesn't make any sense, needs to be 10 million by the same metric. So knowing kind of where those are and knowing what those metrics are. So you take very complicated systems, that's what the fractional CFO does, and breaks them down to something that's simple, easy to measure, easy to manage, so that you can focus on operating the business and not just getting bogged down in the financial details.
Yeah, because one of the other questions I wanted to ask you, which I think you answered, is how do you differentiate the services that you provide as a fractional CFO versus the accountant, bookkeeper, which you mentioned that they were probably more so, when the company was smaller, they were more helpful. So I think you answered it, because what you are doing sounds more like strategy, right? Because you want to kind of advise them on what to spend and then therefore generating revenue. But to me, right, from looking at the numbers is one thing, because it makes mathematical sense. If you spend more, you should get more. But how do you kind of connect that with the business reality? So in terms of, is there a market to absorb more of this product or service? So how do you kind of do that? Do you work with mainly the business owner, or is there like also strategy people specifically focusing on, marketing strategy, for example, and work with them to achieve the goal?
Yeah, I love letting a professional do what a professional does. Mm-hmm. So to me, I'm never going to tell a marketing person what they need to do for marketing. The only thing that I'm going to ask is like, what's my ROI? If I spend X dollars with you, what is my return on X number of dollars? I don't care how you do it, because that's not my arena. I just want to know that we're spending in a smart manner that has a very consistent ROI that exceeds our current profitability, so that we're increasing our margin. And I want to know what that looks like as we expand. So if you're in, say, 3 marketing channels and you're consistently spending in these 3, well, if marketing channel 1, as you increase your spend there, your efficiencies go down. So, if you're spending, say, $10,000 a month, and $10,000 a month produces $100,000 in return, then that's good. Well, if we increase that to 20, does that create $200,000, or do we lose efficiency? Spending 20, maybe that results in 180. So now we're at a 9-to-1 instead of a 10-to-1, and it doesn't make sense to spend more money, right? If we look at the revenue or marketing channel 2, maybe it has a lower, but it's more consistent. And so as we spend dollars here, we know we can increase this. We can continue to increase our spending, and we're going to have the same return like consistently over time, right? And so, and maybe it goes up. Maybe the more you spend, the more you get. I've seen that as well. Social medias are crazy that way. Sometimes the more you spend in that arena, the higher the return, higher the ROI. So that's what I want to know. Does the marketing person have an insight into what that looks like? What's my return? How do I adjust that lever to get to where I need to be? Same thing with operations, same thing with sales, same thing with tech, you name it. Any of the pillars of business that we're in, I just want to know that they understand what's happening, so that I can measure what's occurring in their division, what they're doing, and does it make sense for the company? Does it make the company more money? Does it increase efficiency? If it does, great. If it doesn't, why not? What do we need to do differently to get to a better spot? So I love working with professionals. I love trying to figure this stuff out. One of the things that when I work specifically with a client, I tell them pick 2 hats, because that's all I want you to do. So if you're a business owner and you're trying to do everything, you're not being your highest and best use. Realistically, we can wear 2 hats. So if you want to be the CEO, well, that's a hat, right? So you can maybe do operations and CEO. Maybe you can be CEO and run sales. Maybe you can be CEO and do marketing, but you can't be CEO, be the salesperson, be the marketing person, be the operations person, be the technology person. Like, you can't wear all of those hats, because multitasking is a myth. You can't do everything within your business. And so the kickback I get all the time is I'm the best person for that. And I understand that. You know the business, you created it, you probably are the best person if you could focus there entirely. But you're focused on these other ones. So if you're wearing 5 hats, you're doing 5 jobs, realistically, that's 20% in 5 jobs. You're doing 5, that's 20%. 100 divided by 5, 20%. So if you could hire somebody in that's 80% as good as you are, they're 4 times better than you are at 20%. And so bringing in the right people, putting them in the right seat and giving them the guidelines to expand that out does 2 things. It frees you up to really focus where you're great at, and it allows you to start the process of stepping out and systemizing that business so that it is sellable, so that somebody else can take over, right? It shouldn't collapse if you step out of it. But if you're doing all of the jobs, it will collapse if you step out. So you got to bring in the right people and understand that they're not going to be as good as you in a one-on-one setting. But if you're doing a bunch of different things, even a little bit less than you is still better than you. 80% done is better than your 20% when you're split in a bunch of different ways.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's great. And then the other thing that jumps out is you mentioned so many different industries. You mentioned real estate, restaurants, social media, and I know from your bio that you also focus on crypto, NFT, whatever else. How do you know so many industries? I know that it's probably common services, but you still probably have different expertise needed, right, to understand the industry so that you can advise the owners or managers or whatnot. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, of course. Well, it comes back to letting the professionals do what the professionals do. I am very, very good in my space with tax strategy. I feel like I'm the best at that. That may be ego speaking, but I'm very good. With fractional CFO, as long as I'm sticking with the metrics and the financials, I'm very good there. And so I do need to have a general understanding of the industry, and I can get caught up to speed really well. But if you need your CFO to be your CEO, then you're looking in the wrong direction. And so when I come in with a client and they expect me to know their industry better than they know their industry, you're not hiring me to be your CFO. You're trying to hire me to be your CEO. And I'm not your CEO. I'm your CFO. I need you to be the best in your industry. I need you to have the knowledge of your industry so that we can work together to create the financial framework to take your business to the next level. If you are the expert in your industry, then I can work with you all day long. If you're not the expert in your industry, then I don't know what you're doing in it. We need to hire the person that is the expert in your industry to run your business. And so, yes, I do have a broad understanding of a lot of them. We're invested in a number of companies. We currently are equity holders in 12 different companies. I only do the financial stuff on all of those. I'm just the CFO. I have amazing partners in all of those, but I've partnered with really great people in all of those industries, and I let them do what they're great at, and they let me do what I'm great at, which is the CFO side. And so having an understanding, 100%. Crypto, I'm just a big nerd. I think it's like really cool. I think it's where we're going. I think the metaverse is a great space. I think it's just going to open up a lot more area for people to work together and work on projects across borders. I think that, NFTs, I think that's going to be an interesting play. I think that they're going to replace the keys in the sense of like how we do things and how we interact. So I have a lot of faith in those. But the old monetary system is just that. It's old. Swift has been around like since forever. There's better ways of doing business. And I feel like crypto is going to be that answer. And that's why I have such an experience in crypto. It's also a space that the tax strategy has not been created. The tax laws really aren't that great. And so it's an area that I can heavily impact how we deal with these things moving forward. And I can help to set the standards, set the tax laws, set the tax codes moving forward in this space by offering my my expertise in the area, offering my opinion, offering like how things should happen so that the government still wins, they still get their tax, but we can utilize the crypto as the new monetary system in a way that everybody benefits. So I do like to stay up on that, really more just because I'm a big nerd. But I do find it very interesting. I'm one of the few people that's crypto tax certified, so I'm very good in that space. I talk to a lot of people that are heavily invested in crypto. We create some pretty complex tax strategies around that, more, to mitigate the tax liability, but more for protection for them because the tax laws haven't been written. But then all the other industries, it's really just more about partnering with the right people and helping them to be the experts specifically in that without trying to wear all the hats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm also very interested in this space for sure, like crypto, metaverse. I was very bullish on metaverse, but for whatever reason, I don't think it has made much progress. And even Mark Zuckerberg kind of started to become quiet about it because every time he talks about metaverse, the stock price goes down. But anyway, so I just feel like, and you partially answered the question, is because there's not that much clarity on the tax code related to crypto, how would you even go about advising the client what to do? But I think you answered it by saying it's more of protection, right? Because you really don't probably have as clear guidance as for a real estate tax. For example, you have some strategies that you can use to minimize the tax liability. But what you mentioned is interesting to me is you say you are trying to maybe shape the tax code even. So what's the mechanism of trying to feed that into maybe whoever is writing the law to kind of guide them? Because they're always so behind, right? So they probably realize that they have to put something together years after it has come to the scene. So can you talk about that? Are you active in kind of promoting the industry to the tax regulators?
Yeah, I am. We use opinion letters. So
Okay.
essentially, what we'll do is I'll write something up, and I work with some attorneys on this as well, some tax attorneys, and so we'll write something up like this is the law that we believe could apply to crypto. Generally comes from somewhere else. Like real estate has a lot of overlap. So like if you can't use the wash rule for investments, but you can use it for crypto. So investments, real estate, there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of laws, there's a lot of tax code that somewhat applies to crypto. So we'll take these aspects and then we apply them to crypto. We say, hey, this is the way it reads. This is the way that we understand it. We feel like it should apply to crypto in this manner. And this is the strategy that we've constructed around our client. And so we'll create this and then we send it in. The IRS will look at that and they'll say, yes, that seems reasonable. You're never going to get, well, I don't say never. It's extremely unlikely you're ever going to get something back from the IRS that says, yeah, you guys are brilliant. That's 100% what we meant. That never happens. But you'll get the one back that says, yeah, that seems reasonable. I love the reasonable test, right? So to me, if I get something back and it says, yeah, that seems reasonable, to me, that's you're golden. Let's go. Or they'll say, well, we read it this way, or we interpret it this way, or we would disagree with that assertion based off of this. So there's a little bit of that kind of interaction back and forth, and this becomes tax code because all that stuff gets recorded. All those interactions can play out like in tax court or something like that. And so you get these, and when you get those reasonable, right, which I love, I get any of those, I'm like, this is the new strategy. This is what we're doing. So if for some reason they were to change it later, which the IRS is notorious, and they say, hey, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it this way. Well, if I've got an opinion letter that says what my interpretation was reasonable, I win that every time. So if they say, hey, no, this is what we meant, and I say, well, this is how we treated it based on this opinion letter, right? I'm clean. I'm going to win that every time, because you told me that this was reasonable, and that's the highest expectation that the IRS works within is reasonableness. And so it's not so much black and white. And this is an area that like I've had multiple conversations and people think like, I mean, the IRS is just, it's death and taxes. Like, if it says it, you got to do it. And it's just not that black and white. There's a lot of interpretation that occurs with tax law. And so if you make a reasonable argument and you have a reasonable strategy based on facts and based on prior history, you're going to win that. That's just a reality. Most of the time, I won't say every time, but most of the time you're going to, or it's going to be at least a conversation where you can find some settlement ground or some compromise. And so I love that. I love being able to create that. I love being at the forefront of that. I love being able to protect my clients that are worried that they may have these things taken away, or, well, hey, I made money, but I don't want the IRS to come back and take all my money away because, they treat it this way. And like a lot of times, like mining is a great example, or if you know what mining is, or if you are staking, like staking rewards, they just recently came out, said, hey, their income, which a lot of people freaked out about. Well, I've written multiple opinion letters for staking income that cannot reasonably be monetized. And so if you're in something, you're staking something that creates look, I'm going to get really dorky for a second. So if you're putting this in and you're creating the liquidity pool and there's not a monetary conversion necessarily, that staking stays within the liquidity pool. If you were to pay the tax on that based off of that code, you would force a liquidation that would affect the liquidity pool, which would decrease the value. And the IRS does not allow for situations where having to pay something that's not a monetary result would result in essentially reducing the valuation, because that would be a double count against the person that would do it. So we've got multiple opinion letters with a non-monetizing event that has created the stake, created the liquidity pool, that we've had them come back and say, yes, that's a reasonable assertion to make. So even though it seems very concrete, staking rewards or income, you got to pay taxes on it, there are still situations where that's not true, where with the correct format and with the correct structure and with the correct interpretation, that doesn't play out that way. And this has made, drastic differences for these things. And I won't speak to the specific crypto that we did this with recently, but it was kind of a make or break for them. I believe that if they would have been forced to sell off to meet the needs of that, I think it would have grossly neglected the liquidity pool. And I don't know that token would be where it's at today without that. But because there's no market either, right? Like, how do you sell something when there's no market? How do you monetize it? How do you say, okay, it's worth this number of dollars? Who determines that? FinCEN? Well, financial crimes unit, that's messed up. That's like saying let the cops decide what's a crime and what's not a crime, right? They're not there to interpret, they're there to enforce. So same scenario. So there's always going to be things that are going to happen within this environment as we move forward. Some of them are going to be good. Some of them are going to be bad. Some of them are going to end up being concrete laws. A lot of them are not. A lot of them are going to be overturned, or they're going to be changed at a later date. So it's just interpreting how it works and making sure that you have a good argument for what you're doing in that space.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So do you still see a lot of new crypto startups being created? I feel like there's so much so many like ups and downs. And I think we just probably passed another crypto winter. So you still see a lot of companies springing up? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. There's still a lot. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's scam coins. There's always going to be, right. I don't think we've seen the end of that. I feel like if you want to get in this space, I'm a big proponent of utility coins. That's really, I see more value there. And so I think when you have something that fills a need, I think there's a market for that. What I don't like is meme coins. If I can say shit coins, you can delete me or whatever. That's just a term. But these ones that are like, I call them scam coins because they don't have any basis. They're based on a trend. They're based on whatever. And there has been some that have gained some value and have converted to utility. But I do have concern on those. I think if it has a purpose, then it has a basis. But if it doesn't have a purpose, those are the ones that concern me. And like you mentioned earlier, like you're a fan of the metaverse. I agree. I think it has a lot of utility. I just think that our tech hasn't made it quite there yet. I think we've got the new Google glasses and we got all these things that are coming into play that are going to make that a better environment, and as it becomes more of a level playing field for worldwide use, I think we'll see more in the meta. And this is probably going to be an opinion that is not shared by a lot. But I think COVID had us take a little bit of a step back because, COVID created an environment where everybody kind of worked from home, and Zoom and a lot of these other ones stepped in to fill the gap. And so we didn't focus as much on continuing that metaverse space because we had to have an immediate solution to the virus. And I think Zoom and all these other ones stepped in and we created these video content spaces, and we've stepped away from that social interaction space that the metaverse really should have filled. And so I think as we get used to this and this becomes the new reality, like we don't have to always be in the office. We don't always have to meet, a lot of people, if they wanted to have a conversation, they would go to a coffee shop and have a conversation, right? Well, now you Zoom that, and you have coffee at home. So I think as that becomes more of a reality of how we live our lives, I think we'll see a continued focus into the metaverse because I think that not everybody wants to show up, like full face, right? Like we don't have to do this in our real bodies, our real faces. We can do this in a virtual, and we can kind of be whoever you want to be. You can take on your avatar, or you can explain things. You can throw things up. You can interact. You can have this, working environment in that space much more easily than we can. Me drawing on something and showing you, a picture is very different than me creating it, in a virtual environment. Much faster, much more visual acuity. You can go 3D models, all that. So I think as we step out of this and we become used to this as a new reality, I think we'll see a continued involvement in the metaverse, and I think it will become what we anticipated it being. But again, I know I probably will not be. That probably won't be a popular opinion, but I do think that was a big step.
Yeah, because like the kind of Zoom type of interaction is okay, but it's still not that great because like you are sitting in front of the computer the whole time. Because I would love to have almost having like a real meeting. You can stand up, walk around, write on the board, and all of that will be translated in the metaverse, right? That seems to be a much more natural way of interaction. That's why I really feel like there is definitely a need for that. But as you said, I think the technology is not there. It's probably far from getting there. But hopefully that will become a reality. Whether it's Meta or some other company that does it, doesn't matter. But I think the need is definitely there. So, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, just in languages alone, I believe that the metaverse will solve that problem. And I think that, I think language will still always be because, even with accents, right? You can be a U.S. citizen. If you're a Northerner and you're a Southerner, sometimes you speak two different languages. That's just a reality. So I think there's always going to be a little bit of that. But the simple fact that you can come together in real-time translation to a centralized, language, whatever that conversion is, you're going to have these, working together environments and working on these projects that you've never had before because you lose so much in translation. We all played, the phone game when we were kids, right? Where you whisper to your friend and then it kind of comes around the circle and it always loses that, right? And so translators, amazing people. I appreciate the fact that they can do that real time, but there's always something lost in that. And so having the real time true translation, then it just becomes kind of the accent or the interpretation that's kind of the setback. But it's still way far ahead of having the translator or just having no interaction whatsoever because we speak different languages. It's very difficult for me to reach out to somebody in another country and have a conversation about something now. It's a process. But I think with the metaverse, we eliminate a lot of those barriers to those conversations, and you can have real conversations with somebody completely on the other side of the world that has very different thought process, realities, upbringing, whatever, that's going to give you new insight into whatever problem it is you're trying to solve or whatever you're trying to create. You're going to get all these other interactions, all these other things that create more of a globalized environment for learning and processing and problem solving and everything else. I think that's the big advantage to metaverse. And I don't think that goes away just because we haven't got there yet. I agree with you. I think we're just years away from it, but I think it's coming.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe we can go there a little bit. So what about AI? Because that's kind of the hot topic of the day now, is new AI companies. And I really see tremendous potential, but it's also kind of happening at a very scary speed. Do
Yes.
you have clients in that space? And what's your view on the whole AI, let's say, revolution or progress?
Yeah, we do. We have some clients that are in that space. I think it's a great space to be in. I've had this opinion for a while, and nothing has really changed my mindset. I believe AI is a 70% solution. I truly believe that you still have to do the first 10 to 15%, and I think you have to finish the last 10 to 15%. Or 10 to 20. I just think AI is really 70%. It's the middle. So you have to have a really good idea, or you have to have an idea of what you want, or you have to have prompts. They're going to get you to a certain level. And then I think you have to come back in and finish it out. I think AI produced products are not good. I've seen plenty of them. They're just not great. They don't read properly. They're not real solutions. They're more rough drafts. And I don't care how good it gets, there's always going to be, in my opinion, some human involvement that still needs to occur to be good enough. And so I believe it's a 70% solution, and we're still going to have people on the front end, still going to have people on the back end. But I think that increases our efficiency tremendously. The simple fact that a job that normally would require, say, 100 hours, if AI can handle the 70 in the middle, and so now we're down to, say, a 100-hour task taking 30 hours. That's great. That's high level efficiency. That's a huge improvement. So I do believe in AI. I don't believe that it takes over for human interaction. I don't think that it replaces. I think it's going to force us to advance. I think it's going to force us to get better at some of the things and become more efficient in what we do. But I'm not against that. I don't have an issue with that. Maybe it sounds elitist or whatever, but I just really believe that we should be constantly learning. We should be constantly improving our skill set, and if AI forces us to kind of step into that and advance ourselves and learn new things, or take on, even if they're scary, take on new opportunities. I believe that that's a good thing overall for us, globally and even just, locally in the United States. I think we need to step our game up. I think we need to do better. I think we need to find more efficiencies. I think we need to solve more problems at a higher level. And so I believe in AI as a tool, but not as a replacement, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you, definitely. I don't quite get people's sentiment that AI is going to take over and it will kind of be, I don't know, thinking or sentient on its own. I'm not a scientist, so I can't say I would prove that definitively, but I just don't see that, because at the end of the day, you still need the human input, right? I heard the other kind of saying, which is similar to what you were describing too, is you have to go from 0 to 1 from a person, but then the AI could go from 1 to 100 much faster than humans can. But that first step still has to come from the creative mind, right? So, but anyway, very interesting topic. We can, probably spend another whole episode or two on that. We do have to wrap up though. So I have 2 more questions for you. Do you have any book recommendation?
Oh man, I read so much. I'm going to give you 2 of my rinse and repeat books. I think both of these are amazing books. One is called The One Thing. I think it's a great focus book. It's very quick, easy read, but it's called The One Thing, and it teaches you how to focus on the one thing to make movement forward. And I think that's great. I think it's a great place to be if you're stuck in kind of this decision paralysis. The One Thing is a great place to be. If you don't feel like your business is growing at the level that you need to, great book for that. The other one is Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time. I'm a big fan of working less to make more money, and buy back your time is based around that principle. Dan is freaking brilliant. I love that guy to death. Like, just crazy smart. And so that concept of really kind of systemizing everything and like, focusing your attention on what matters, I think is huge. And it definitely goes to what I try to convince all of my business partners as well as my clients is you can make more money by working less if you work smartly. And that's a great book for that. So that would, so not one, but I'll give you two. Those are probably my two highest rotation books.
Okay, great. Yeah, I read The One Thing by Gary Keller, but I don't think I've heard about the other one. I'll definitely check it out. Yeah, sounds like a great book. All right, last question for you. Where can people find out more about you?
So best is our website, CFOAF.com. So Chief Financial Officer AF. So CFOAF.com. It's just the letters. We're on there. We have all the different pillars are on there. You can reach out there. You can set appointments there. It's a pretty great space to be in. There's some good information there. There's clear cut, like, hey, you need help with this, schedule here or whatever. So the website's a great spot, but we're on social medias too. So I'm old, I'm 46. So I'm a Facebook person, but we're on the rest of them as well. Like I'm a Facebook guy. So my personal's on Facebook, but we also have the business CFOAF is on there. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. Unfortunately, we're on TikTok. That's the biggest time waster on the planet. But nothing against it. Great platform. Like they've done a great job with it. But that's not my generation. It's definitely a much younger generation. But all the socials were there. Or they can just shoot us an email. Pretty much anything at CFOAF is going to work. I'm Byron at CFOAF.com. But we have hello, we have admin. We have a ton of emails on there. You pretty much throw anything and it's going to get to us. But the website's probably the fastest.
Okay, excellent. All right. Thank you so much, Byron. This has been really, really interesting, and I had a lot of fun talking to you. Yeah.
Thank you for having me. It was good times.
Yeah.
I probably talked way too much, but that's
no, that's great. That's what it's about. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much again.